The Supreme Court on Thursday banned the NCERT's latest political science textbook for Class VIII, calling the contents of one chapter a calculated attempt to erode the credibility and prestige of the judiciary. A three-judge bench of Chief Justice Suryakant, Justice Joymala Bagchi and Justice Vipul M. Pancholi ordered the immediate removal of the chapter from all physical and digital platforms. It directed authorities to seize printed copies already in circulation. The court barred any teaching from the book. It imposed a blanket prohibition on its production and distribution and issued a show cause notice to the centre and the NCERT chief seeking an explanation. When the hearing began, Solicitor General Tushar Mehta informed the court that the NCERT has already withdrawn the textbook and apologized. But the CJI observed that the statement issued by the NCERT did not contain any apology. At the heart of the controversy is a chapter that referred to corruption at various levels of the judiciary, warned that such corruption can weaken access to justice, stated that misconduct cases have dented public confidence, flagged massive case backlogs across courts, and noted that instances of corruption within the judiciary have surfaced in the past. After sharp observations from the Supreme Court, the Union Education Minister expressed regret.
ये अत्यंत चिंताजनक है। हमारे सामने ये जब संज्ञान में आया, हमने उसको तुरंत एनसीईआरटी को सारी किताबों को विड्रॉ करवाया और इसमें जो आज माननीय न्यायपालिका ने, सर्वोच्च न्यायपालिका ने जो टिप्पणी दिया है वो हमारे लिए मान्य है। सरकार उसके प्रति दायित्ववान है। मैं उसके लिए खेद प्रकट करता हूँ।
This isn't NCERT's first brush with the courts, but the response has rarely been this swift. In December 2021, petitioners challenged Class XII History chapter which mentioned Shah Jahan and Aurangzeb funding temples. The Delhi High Court dismissed the case after petitioners withdrew their plea. The same year, NCERTs faced accusations of glorifying Mughal rulers. The Rajasthan lower court issued a notice but took no further action. The Supreme Court's sweeping ban has ignited a larger constitutional debate. One group argues that this is an attempt to discredit and weaken a key constitutional institution. Critics question whether the court has shown equal urgency in responding to earlier controversies involving textbooks revisions. So the core question remains, in a democracy built on checks and balances, is the judiciary beyond criticism? Bureau Report, India Today.
All right, the latest news break coming in on this. Prime Minister has stepped in. He's expressed anguish over the NCERT row. He was upset over the judicial corruption chapter. Modi has slammed judicial graft lessons to kids. Modi, during meeting, he had a cabinet meeting today and he said, what are we teaching students on judges? Who is overseeing NCERT textbook content? The Prime Minister wants accountability fixed in the NCERT row. Let me also give you a backdrop. NCERT, since the publishing of the chapter, has expressed regret. They have called back the books. 38 books are now still in circulation. They have called those books back. You have the Education Minister, Mr. Dharmendra Pradhan, who's openly come out, issued an apology. But all of this clearly did not go down well with the Supreme Court issuing scathing observations today, taking down where the NCERT is concerned. All right, I want to immediately cut across to Justice Madan Lokur, former Judge, Supreme Court. He's joining us. Appreciate you taking the time out and joining us, Justice Lokur. Your first reaction on the Supreme Court lashing out against the NCERT, though the NCERT has apologized, so has the Education Minister. What do you make of the latest controversy, Justice Lokur?
Well, you see, it's like this. There was really no occasion for NCERT to bring in a chapter on corruption in the judiciary in the Class VIII textbook. From what I understand, in the previous editions of the textbook, the role of the judiciary in society had been mentioned. Now, they've suddenly included a chapter on corruption in the judiciary. Where was the need for that? And what is NCERT trying to suggest? that the judiciary in India is corrupt. The judges are appointed by the President of India. Is NCERT trying to suggest that the President of India appoints corrupt persons as judges? What are they trying to suggest? So I'm glad the Honorable Chief Justice of India has taken suo motu cognizance of this, and let's see where it goes.
But Justice Lokur, allow me to give out a contrarian opinion on this, which many are echoing today. While the judiciary, as you said, sir, is a vital pillar of our democracy, the arbiter of the Constitution, but there is an argument. That is why the judiciary should be above board. There are no holy cows or sacred cows where a democracy is concerned. There have been cases of judicial corruption we've seen in the very recent past. Why should that not be taught to children?
Well, the judiciary is not above discussion, it is not above criticism. I mean, if a judge does something wrong, he can always be, there's an in-house procedure to discipline the judge. If that doesn't help, if it is something very serious that is wrong, there is an impeachment process. But you can't, pinprick the judiciary and say that whatever you're doing, is wrong, and make it into a sort of a habit that if something happens, well, you pinprick the judiciary and say that, listen, you guys are corrupt. What is the message that is being sent? We have to look at that, and it's not a message to adults or to college-going students. It's to Class VIII students. So it's not a question about the judiciary not being accountable. That's not the question. The question is, what is the message that is being sent?
Justice Lokur, I hear you when you say that Class 8 students, impressionable minds, are taught about a corrupt judiciary or the possibility of this. There are many, Justice Lokur, that today who think that there is an insidious propaganda against the judicial branch and that a lot has happened in the recent past to confirm the same. And this is part of the same propaganda.
You see, I think what has been happening over the last couple of years, it's not something that's happened only in the recent past. I think in the last couple of years, there has been a lot of executive interference in the affairs of the judiciary, particularly in the appointment process. All right. So persons who have been recommended for being appointed as judges, the government has not acted upon those recommendations, or they have either withheld those recommendations or they've rejected those recommendations. So there is this, I will not say insidious, but there is this, targeting of the judiciary to make it an independence-mukt judiciary, right? The judiciary should be committed. It is something which Mrs. Indira Gandhi as Prime Minister tried, and which is something which I'm afraid is being tried at the moment. And to some extent, there has been some success.
But Justice Lokur, the judiciary and the top court in this instance has shown judicial activism by taking suo motu cognizance, which came at the behest of Mr. Kapil Sibal and Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who flagged this chapter to the top court, and therefore suo motu action was taken. But why do we not see similar kind of activism by the judiciary in other cases? And I'll give you an example. Petitioners who had gone to court regarding the NCERT again on chapters being removed where the history is concerned, where protests in India's modern history is concerned, be it the Chipko movement or Naxalism, they were allowed to withdraw consecutively. And lots of civil rights activists believe that this is the duty of the judiciary also to step in at these times. Where does the activism fall short when it is about, cuts in NCERT books which could impact impressionable minds, but when it came down to impacting the judiciary, only then did the court step in?
Yes, it is. It is. The right to protest is a fundamental right that is guaranteed as long as it's a peaceful protest. All right. So if the Supreme Court has failed, or if any court has failed to protect that fundamental right, it's a problem. Okay. But that has got nothing to do with corruption. I mean, what is NCERT trying to say? I mean, they're not talked about protests and all that in this particular chapter. They've talked about corruption. Where was the need for that? Where was the occasion for that?
Justice Lokur, I'd like to circle back to the question I asked you earlier. So, do you look at this maybe as like what many suggest, a concerted position of trying to discredit the judiciary?
The view of NCERT, their director, and he did not explain anything. I mean, he didn't even respond. So why should that happen? I mean, if the NCERT thinks they're doing the right thing, they should have responded to Indian Express and said, well, this is what our view is. So it's clearly targeting the judiciary.
All right, appreciate you taking the time out and joining us, Justice Lokur. Thank you so much. I'm joined right now by Dr. Ashwini Kumar, former Union Minister and Law Justice of India. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for joining us this evening. Your quick reactions on the Supreme Court coming down heavy, rejecting the apology of NCERT over the chapter on corruption in judiciary.
Well, I think it's a decisive pushback by the judiciary against what it sees as an attempt to denigrate it and to compromise with the administration of justice. I personally believe that the sweeping and inferential indictment of judiciary in the subchapter that is under challenge in the NCERT curricula is reprehensible and I think needed to be curbed with a strong hand, which the judiciary has now done. I have no doubt that this case would be used by the judiciary, hopefully, to lay down guidelines for the future so that no institution of our constitutional democracy is subject to a sweeping indictment without any empirical evidence whatsoever. I believe that the matter raises a much more fundamental question about the resilience and about the integrity of the institutions of India's libertarian democracy. Supreme Court, or for that matter, any court or any institution, be it parliament or the executive, could be faulted for certain and specific missteps. But a sweeping indictment of any constitutional institution is wholly unacceptable and is a constitutional heresy.
But Dr. Kumar, in a democracy, there are no sacred cows. Why should the judiciary be above questioning? There have been recent cases of corruption that have been very evident. And why shouldn't children learn on that? Why should the judiciary be above question?
Well, there's no doubt that there are aberrations in every institution, as I said in my opening statement, and there are processes to deal with those aberrations. There are processes to deal with those cases, as indeed is being done in several cases. However, the judiciary as an institution is much wider than the specific instances of missteps or wrongdoing. So therefore, to treat or to raise perception founded on certain instances to the level of reality and the ultimate truth is wrong. And what is worse is that children of impressionable age are sought to be told about corruption as if it was a gospel truth. There are instances of wrongdoing, and in every country, in every institution, and they cannot be defended. Of course not. And the judges have suffered flack. They have taken censor, and they have been subjected to scrutiny in various other forms. But to teach in the classrooms of the 8th class that the judiciary as an institution is corrupt inferentially is wholly wrong. Just imagine what happens to the right to reputation and dignity of a vast majority of our judges with impeccable credentials. What happens to them? What about their right? So, right of free speech or right of censor is constitutionally subject to certain restrictions. And the Supreme Court would have done well to ensure that there is no whole-scale denigration or tarnishing of the image of the institution. The Chief Justice has taken the right step at the right time in calling those to account who are responsible for such a misstep.
But Dr. Kumar, let me ask you this. The top court has taken suo motu cognizance of this, shown judicial activism, which, if you look back, is subjective. They are the conscience keeper of democracy. But having said that, in the case of NCERT, this is not the first case where entire chapters, there has been stuff which has been contentious. Chapters have been removed earlier, not just on history, on protest. The top court of this country has not been as proactive in those cases as it's been when it came down to its own position and the question on its own institutionality.
Well, better late than never. I wouldn't have minded if they had been active earlier as well. But there always comes a tipping point, and I think if this is a tipping point for the judiciary, so be it. And hopefully, the activism of the court will not be limited only when it comes to questions about corruption and judiciary. They will be as active in correcting aberrations in other institutions. I have no problem with that proposition. But two wrongs don't make a right. Or let's say if there has been some latitude in other cases, doesn't mean that you continue to keep giving a latitude. So therefore, I think at some point of time you have to take a call. But this was, I'll tell you, this is a standalone case in the sense that nowhere, at least to my knowledge, has in any constitutional democracy, a chapter been added in the school curricula to say that a particular institution, which is a vital pillar of democracy in that country, as indeed it is in ours, is corrupt as an institution, as a whole. I think this is the only example of its kind, if my memory doesn't fail me. Therefore, extreme cases require urgent measures, and the Supreme Court, I'm glad, has risen to the occasion. And I'm sure that this would become a precedent for the Supreme Court to check similar insidious propaganda against other institutions and in other places as well. There has to be some empirical basis in the discovery of truth. That is the fundamental principle of judicial adjudication. There has to be some factual basis for this. Now, just because 4, 5, 8, 10 out of thousands of judges have been found prima facie guilty of some wrongdoing does not mean that you have the right to tarnish the institution as a whole. That's the issue. That's the point of principle I'm trying to make. Nothing more, nothing less.
Okay, fair point. Dr. Kumar, thank you for joining us this evening. Let's get a contrarian point of view right now, because we've had Justice Lokur, we've had the former Law Minister, Dr. Kumar, both of them coming out and suggesting that the judiciary has done exactly the right thing by taking suo motu cognizance. Young, impressionable mind in the 8th grade cannot learn that one of the tallest pillars of our democracy could be corrupt. It's not college students, but young, impressionable minds. Joining me right now is J.S. Rajput, Mr. J.S. Rajput, educationist, and he's been the former director of the NCERT. Thank you, sir, for joining us this evening. You've heard the two comments earlier. What's your take on the Supreme Court today rejecting the apology by the NCERT and harsh criticism of the NCERT on adding a chapter on corruption in the judiciary for the 8th standard?
I am of the opinion that this issue could have been handled in a much better manner. If somebody had mentioned in the Honorable Supreme Court about a particular chapter, the first thing was to ask the NCERT to let this Honorable Court know why did they decide to have this chapter, what were they thinking behind it, what is their intent, and that could have been examined. Heaven should not have fallen if it had taken 2-3 days. After all, judiciary is known for delays, and we are adjust to it. The Supreme Court's observations have unfortunately lowered the image of the NCERT. That was not necessary. This is one particular chapter. They have more than 250 books to prepare for whenever there is a new syllabus. It's a great responsibility. No doubt, they have to read every word, every comma, full stop. This is the responsibility of the NCERT. And therefore, they have to be very careful. And when I was the director of NCERT, we all were very careful. We had such glitches, but we amended them. We were criticized in the Parliament of India, 8 hours in Lok Sabha, 6 hours in Rajya Sabha. But we could say that why we have done this, and we were given an opportunity by everybody who was criticizing us. This time, unfortunately, I'm sure the most of the Supreme Court judges must also have read NCERT books, and they would have a sense of gratitude to the NCERT. The whole country respects NCERT, and therefore it is our national responsibility to ensure the dignity of NCERT is not compromised because something has crept into it. I fully agree it should not have been done, but the manner it has been handled does not, and I'm saying it with full responsibility, has not been handled keeping in view the dignity of the institutions. I am sure they stand humiliated before the country. This was not required. This could have been avoided, particularly by such an august body of the country, the Supreme Court of India, for which each one of us a tremendous amount of respect. This is my general opinion. They could have handled it. I think, in my own opinion, I'm a teacher. I know how things should be implemented. I teach how conflict resolutions ought to be handled, and therefore I'm very firm about my view that there would have been a better way of handling this whole issue.
Mr. Rajput, you seem to suggest that while the Supreme Court thinks, and it is an institution, a tall institution in our country, you seem to suggest so is the NCERT. So by saying what the court has and taking suo motu cognizance, the court has demeaned the institution of the NCERT.
I am of the opinion that if Supreme Court is a conscious keeper of the country, NCERT is the maker of the future of India, the future generations. NCERT has the responsibility to create the future of India, and everybody will acknowledge this. So these two august bodies must have mutual respect for each other. After all, one can point out several instances. Take the instance of Justice Verma, who has been sitting idle at his residence, and the Supreme Court has not been able to resolve it. Why this delay? Similarly, if some glitch happens, now nobody can comment on the Supreme Court. But if NCERT does it, it has to be treated with tremendous amount of respect. It has such an experience of 1961 onwards. One of the most honored and respected organization of India internationally is the NCERT. We have the expertise, we have the experts. Every word is seen by not one person, but so many other stages are there. I certainly would repeat that Supreme Court has done it in a hurry. They could have done it in a much better fashion. I think that should suffice.
Mr. Rajput, you say that the top court, apex court, acted hastily and could have handled the situation better, differently. Now, there is a huge section out there that is of the opinion, Mr. Rajput, that this is all part of a concerted effort and a propaganda which the NCERT has been roped into to play into the narrative to discredit the judiciary bit by bit.
No, I think the reverse could also be said. The reverse is happening now. NCERT has been discredited for a fault which is not of that measure and magnitude. Every year in NCERT, there is a practice that we receive suggestions on every book from students, from teachers, from academics, from scholars. They are examined throughout the year, and when the reprint takes place, all of them are corrected and the modifications are made. So I think perhaps this is a work of the experts. Now, NCERT should not be expected to go to Supreme Court to get an approval. They have their realm. They work in judiciary. They are the conscience keeper. But NCERT is the maker of the future of India. If you humiliate it, you are, in fact, somebody, you are diminishing the stature of that body. And as the former director of the NCERT and a professor of 52 years standing, I feel saddened and disappointed.
All right, Mr. Rajput, thank you for joining us this evening and giving us your point of view, quite contrarian to the other two guests that we had. But that is the beauty of a democracy, where you have contrarian points of views.